I saw you first on a Sunday evening about the altar as I was kneeling upon Christ's passion as I was reading. But my eye was on you.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to This Magical Life. And for today's episode, I'm speaking to a wonderful, wonderful person who, by an act of magic, I'm going to bring on to the stage. Sheila Chandra. Hello,
Hi.
Sheila. How lovely to see you. Um,
Yes,
Sheila,
very nice to see you.
when did we first meet? It was a long
We
time ago.
met in the assembly rooms of at Glastonbury, in Glastonbury Town in, I think, 99?
99. So sort of, oh my gosh, that's 26 years ago. Crikey.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
yeah. Long
terrifying,
time
isn't
ago.
it?
Yeah.
And Sheila Chandra had, I think your album "Weaving My Ancestors' Voices" had come out, and it's just the most wonderful collection and rendition of music. And for those of you who don't know Sheila Chandra's work, I hope as soon as this interview is over, you'll go and dive online and discover her music. It's so beautiful. And one of the reasons I think that I find it so inspiring is not only the beauty of your voice, Sheila, and the particular song, but what you do is you weave together influences from East and West, from which is reflected in your heritage. Which is tell us about your heritage. Tell us about yourself.
I have a Yorkshire grandmother who was born in India and never saw England. And then I have 3 South Indian grandparents, so that makes me 3/4 Indian and a quarter English.
How fantastic!
So, they were doing their own version of East and West, my maternal grandparents. But, yeah, the challenge with weaving, which came out in 1992, but we met via Simon Emerson, who sadly
Yeah.
passed away a couple of years ago,
Mm.
who was the founder of Africal Sound System, if everyone, knows about them. They were sort of massive in the world music, field in the 90s. Um yeah, the point was that I felt there was a kind of world heritage for vocalists. And often we're encouraged to stay in our own lane, as it were, because we're easier to market and we're easy, or we might be very, very sort of enthralled by our own tradition. But for me, what fascinated me was the thought that the voice is the only instrument we know physically, the construction of which hasn't changed. So, you get dulcimers of various kinds made in various ways across the world, or bagpipes in Bulgaria and bagpipes in Scotland, but they're not constructed in quite the same way. So you've got this world heritage of musical traditions, and then you've got this instrument that remain the same. And I thought there has to be connections between them. And there was a challenge because I wanted to play live for the first time. I'd been a studio artist for 10 years, and I thought, well, I don't want to hide behind anyone else. I want to learn my stagecraft. So I decided to give totally solo performances. So I had to write material that would allow me within a single melodic line to go between various vocal traditions like Vedic chanting and Gregorian chant, or a 900-year-old Irish folk song and sort of muezzin style Arabic vocal, and back again without taking a breath. That was the technical challenge of Weaving My Ancestors' Voices, and really that the real world trilogy that I did in the 90s. So yeah, that I suppose my story is the story of diaspora, of emigration, of settling, of integration, of the richness of cultures clashing, really.
Yeah, absolutely, and the effect is absolutely stunning and so beautiful. And then having achieved such success at an early age, what sort of age were you when you started your career?
I went to a theatre art school,
Right.
and from the age of 11. And they did a mass audition for Grange Hill, which
Oh,
was, only one series old at that point in
yeah.
1978, I think. And so I auditioned and I got the part of Sudhamani Patel. So I had this sort of minor part on Grange Hill. And then Steve Kerr, who was forming Monsoon, which was this a band with he was writing music that borrowed from the Hindi film style and moved it and merged it with pop and and Indian classical too. And he was looking for a singer, and I'd done a demo tape for as part of what the school had put me forward to, and he discovered it and said that's the voice of Monsoon, and then found I was Asian. So I was probably the only singer of the right age, Asian singer of the right age, to be in a pop band and in the country, and he found me. It was quite incredible. One of those synchronicity things. And
Fantastic.
Monsoon had a global hit with Ever So Lonely when I was 16.
When you were 16, Ever So Lonely is such a haunting song, isn't it? It's so beautiful.
Well,
Um,
you can't forget the chorus because it does repeat 33 times. So it's catchy. You're not going to forget it easily, I don't
that's
think.
right. That's right.
Ever so Ever so Ever so Ever so Ever so
That-
It's catchy. You're not going to forget it easily, I don't think.
that's right. That's right. And you were only 16. So by the time you were, say, 18, were you, in inverted commas, famous?
Well, I was famous as soon as the single broke, really, because it
Right.
broke first on the dance floor. And the thing about the 80s was there was no category such as world music. So there were no world music press programs, journalists. There was no specialism. And it was, if you remember the era of synth pop, and everybody, computers and synthesizers were. You got Gary Newman, you've got OMD, you've got those sorts of people making very, very electronic sounds, and then here comes Monsoon in 1982 with this completely acoustic track. I mean, it had crash beats, but everything other source on it was acoustic. And we were ranked along with all the other big bands in rock and pop in the rock and pop section, and that hasn't really happened since 1987. So we were at this sort of really interesting sociological kind of crux point where world music wasn't. It was perceived as exotic, but in terms of the structure of the industry, it wasn't being othered and hived off into a separate chart. So ordinary people, I was not famous in a world music world. I was famous as a pop star because
Is it
that's all there was.
that that
There was
that's
pop and classical, and that was that.
that was fantastic. And did it? I mean, at the age of 16, it's very hard for it not to go to your head, as it were. Did it? Was it quite a disorienting time? Did it go to your head, as it were?
Uh, I was an extreme introvert at a school full of extroverts, and it was nice to have a little bit of attention, but it didn't go to my head because part of what you get at a theatre arts school is the ethos of professionalism.
Yeah,
And you know how to behave. You look at the career journeys of various stars, even people who've left 5 years ago when you're a junior,
yeah,
and you think, oh, they're going off the rails a bit there. They're drinking a bit too much, or they're a bit big-headed, or they're starting to be unpopular because of this. It's the kind of thing you watch. So even at 16, I think if you're made a star and it goes on a long time and you become very detached from reality, then it's easier to go off the rails and become big headed. But
yes.
Monsoon, you know, Eversole only got to 9 in one chart, 12 in another. So there were two sort of official charts. And then the second single, Shakti, only just got into the top 30, I think. And so, we didn't have that sort of sustained um, fame bubble going on.
Yes, and did you play at did you go to Real World and play in the was it Real World? No, the festivals that Peter Gabriel
WOMAD, you mean?
WOMAD, that's what I meant. Yeah,
Yeah. No, Monsoon were a studio band.
right,
And, because people were so synth and video orientated in the early 80s, those were the big technologies coming through.
right.
That was sort of acceptable. And I didn't play live until my sixth solo album, which was the one on Peter Gabriel's label, Weaving My Ancestors' Voices. So what I did in the meantime was um, Phonogram, the major record company Monsoon was signed to,
Hmm.
were not happy that the second and third single hadn't done as well, and through the contract assassin told us to drop the Indian influence, which was like complete antithesis of what we were about.
Yeah,
So they seemed to think it was a kind of costume that you could put on or take off. Do you know what
yeah,
I mean? Not
yes,
who we were and what we were interested in.
yes,
And they were responding to the market as large companies do. And so we disbanded to get out of the contract. And
right.
Steve Coe, the founder member of Monsoon, had started a tiny label to put out an EP which got the attention of Phonogram. So I went back to the indie pop label and made 5 albums over 9 years with a 5-year sabbatical in between.
Well, gosh, lots of work, and then something happened in your career that was really challenging, which
Mhm.
which I wonder if you could share with us, because I think it's helpful to share these things, even these difficult things. You had a health challenge, didn't you?
Yeah, so I was giving my first live performances with this solo voice style, which was very vocally demanding.
Hmm.
And then I was in a car crash. Well, two things happened. I fell out of a hammock, the rope broke, and I smacked my head on the concrete. And then I was
Oh,
in a car crash, and very, very small one. But the car was written off, and it had jarred my eyes, and I got a detached retina and was rushed for emergency surgery at the
hmm.
middle end of 92. And I found out much, much later that they had damaged my vocal cords when they intubated me.
Hmm.
The intubation blade had nicked one of my vocal cords, and that was fine when it was nicked, but as it started to heal, it produced scar tissue, which is not as stretchy as ordinary tissue, obviously. So my vocal cords couldn't meet in quite the same position, which produced a sort of perennial strain in my throat. So I had
Yeah.
stamina problems basically from that point on, and I limped on, and I made another 2 albums with Real World, and then I made a collaboration album with Steve on the indie pop label in 2001. And then I think because my system had become primed for pain, although
Hmm.
I was still doing live concerts up until about 2009, 2010, my system had become primed for pain. And then I hit menopause and developed burning mouth syndrome, which is neurological pain in the mouth, which unfortunately for me is triggered by talking. So I limit the amount I talk.
Yeah.
When we were setting this up, I had to give you days when I could talk and when I couldn't. So
Exactly, and do please say if at any point in this interview, you said that's enough. I've
I've
talked
got
enough,
plenty of
but
teeth. Thanks.
oh, that's good. That's good. And burning mouth syndrome is something that, if viewers and listeners haven't heard about it, if you Google it, you'll see, as with so many things, lots of people suffer from this. And it's not fully, as far as I understand it, it's not fully understood yet, is it? Is that right?
Anything that's called a syndrome is usually a a package of symptoms which they don't have a cause for.
Yeah.
They're just a sort of cluster of syndrome symptoms, That's, it's like chronic fatigue syndrome. They don't know what causes that. They can offer palliative care, but they don't always have
Have
a
a
ways to improve things.
Yes, yes, because before we started, I was sharing with you that I actually suffered from it when my first marriage collapsed, and it was an extremely stressful time. And for about a year or so, I felt as if I had uh, burnt my mouth with a boiling cup of coffee. And I
Mm.
saw doctors and specialists, and nobody could help me. The only advice I got really was to eat avocados. Um, uh, they just couldn't help. And it went away, it just diminished over time. So it was clearly some sort of stress induced issue. Um, but for you, it's carried on. And does it wax and wane in terms of its symptoms?
If I don't speak
Hmm,
for long enough,
hmm,
it dies down to a tiny simmer.
right.
Um, but the minute I start speaking, it flares back up again, and then it just climbs and climbs and climbs. So if I spoke for 4 hours today,
Yeah.
on and off, then I would be in so much pain I might not be able to sleep.
Oh gosh,
So
gosh.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it's tricky like that. That's why I've
So
got to ration the
you've
talk
got
time. But equally, I don't want my vocal mechanism to atrophy. So I do, and also for my sanity, I do need to talk sometimes.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So with this challenge, this event that occurred for you, how did you reorient your life? What did you do? You had this very successful career. You create all these albums. What did you do?
Well, unfortunately for me, the burning mouth is triggered by sound,
Hmm,
talking, and then I had this throat pain. It was also triggered by making sound of any kind. And with the two pains together, I could no longer even warm up. I mean, I just couldn't stand the pain.
yeah,
So there was at that point, I was sort of at a dead stop. It wasn't a question of being able to limp past stamina issues and pain issues. It was no, can't we
yeah,
just can't go here. So I had to think about something else, something else to do, which is when you've been. I mean, I was fanatical about being a singer from the point that my voice broke when I was 12. So um, when I suddenly had this very adult, emotional, rich sound rather than that sort of piping voice that children have.
hmm,
Um, and it's very difficult when your whole life has been about having certain creative aims and achieving that, and you know that you're not going to be able to go on and do that. So, and it's also the way in which people identify with you. They kind of see you as singer first and person second. I think it's probably the same with clergymen.
hmm,
You know, you see the profession first.
hmm.
Um, and so when the profession is removed, is that there's a kind of
Who am I?
identity problem
Yes.
in a
Yes.
way. And also I needed to find a way to communicate and be useful and to find something else that I didn't dare hope for a talent equal to that in another field, because I don't know if you really get two talents like that in a lifetime, or some lucky people do. I don't think I did. Um, and I had been writing a diary for at that point, that's about 13 years. And I probably unconsciously got my 10,000 hours of writing in, and developed a kind of, and as I was having to communicate with people more through writing notes while I was out or typing, rather than meetings, it started to feel more like my actual voice. And that process has continued actually. So it became quite natural to consider writing as a alternative. And so I'm not a fiction writer. I'm a non-fiction sort of self-help type writer. And I published a couple of books and discovered there was also a need for, you know, particularly from people who aren't privileged enough to know people already in creative industries, that there was a need for someone to go and explain the culture and coach people into developing their own creativity. Usually a creator who's worked at the levels I have would be too busy with their career. But my knowledge doesn't have to go to waste. I can't do it anymore, but I can help other people to do it.
So Sheila, this is really interesting that your voice, as it were, if I heard you correctly, you were saying your voice transferred from actually physically articulating the voice to expressing yourself in writing, and there's this talking about the authorial voice and all the rest of the voice of the author. And you published books. What were the books that you wrote?
I wrote Banish Clutter Forever, which is sort of book on home organizing and clutter
Mm,
removal and things, for Vermilion, which is part of Random House in 2010.
mm,
And then I wrote Organizing Your Creative Career, which is more for people in creative industries professionally. And that was out in 2020 on, well, it was out in 2017 and then revised in 2020 on Watkins Publishing.
Watkins, okay. And then you moved into actually coaching creatives. Now that's really interesting. And those who know about Druidry, the Druid tradition, will also know that creativity forms a huge focus of interest for people involved in Druidry because of and this concept of the hour. This idea, really, I think, behind obviously not only Druidry. I mean, lots of people have these ideas that creativity is so important to us, and that it's really coming from very deep inside. Whether you believe there's a soul or wherever it's coming from, we seem to have this innate need, so many of us, to bring something into the world, to give something. And on your website you invite people who are interested in being coached in their creativity to contact you. How do you work with somebody who approaches you in that context?
Well, I have a little sort of consultation, which is kind of a matchmaking process,
Hmm.
free consultation of half an hour, where the potential coachee sends me, I send them a questionnaire, and they send it back so that I have some idea. I'm up to speed on what the sort of basic, what field they're in, where they're at, what they want to do, that kind of thing. And then we have a little chat to see if we're going to click and work well together, because I
Hmm.
think there is a certain amount of, speaking the same language, having rapport and all that
Yeah.
process. And then, we work on usually monthly, although I have done weekly sessions all over the world, in various industries, writers, singers, instrumentalists, painters. Um, one guy was an academic author. It's great because I think coaching needs to be done in a sort of confidential, quiet situation. But it also means that using online tools that you can be in your bedroom
Hmm.
and still get the benefit of it. I work on a very, very individual basis. It's client led.
Hmm.
We talk about what the client is struggling with, particularly around, some people need to work very intensely around letting themselves go into the creative process. Others need more sort of industry advice, which I try to give.
Yeah. Yes.
There is, as I was saying before, there is a sort of professional culture in the creative industries, as there is in any, there is in the medical
Hmm.
profession.
Yeah.
So, it helps to, when you're struggling with stuff like that, to kind of know what comes first, who to approach, where to get help, where to get support, all those sorts of things I can also help with. So,
Yes, exactly. So that's a kind of mentoring role, isn't it? Somebody who's
yeah.
who's traveled the path before you and
Mm.
knows the terrain a bit and is able to share their advice and their wisdom and their experience to help you, so you don't maybe make the same sort of make mistakes or go off in the wrong direction. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in these days when we notice the arts are being quietly taken over by people of, who are upper middle class or upper class,
Hmm.
people who went to elite schools and have the money to do free internships or spend 5 years of their career working for nothing because they've got a financial safety net.
Hmm.
It's important to redress the balance because the arts used to be, from the 50s and 60s onwards, a good way for working class people to have their stories told and to make their mark, which is very, very important. So,
Right.
yeah, helping with that, with the mentoring side of it, is very important from a sort of sociological point of
Yeah.
view.
Absolutely. And because you've had experience both in the music industry and in the publishing industry, you're able to help, writers and musicians, I guess. And
And
I
also
would imagine.
one of the people I helped first before I was officially a coach was Stick, the street artist.
Oh,
I
really?
met him. I met him. He'd been homeless for 10 years and painting on the streets.
Yeah.
And I think he'd had one group show, but he wasn't sort of selling to clients, painting canvases and selling to clients. Now he's one of the biggest street artists in the world.
Wow. So even though art isn't, even though you knew about music and writing, you were able to help him in the arts field as well. That's
Yeah.
which, yeah, yeah, which is great because obviously
Yeah.
there's
So
a
I
lot of
have some
crossover.
basic understanding of that. I'm not a huge one understanding, but yeah, some understanding of the visual arts as well. Yeah.
Right, right, right. And well, that's fantastic. And then in terms of the coaching, which as you said is more client led and where you're dealing with, I would imagine, people struggling with feelings of inadequacy or feelings of, blockages of various kinds. Um, have you developed a sort of a way of working with people who feel blocked or that they're not quite able to give their best?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It may be a fear of being seen, a fear of being successful, having a critical parent or teacher's voice in their head. It may be a lack of confidence about what they want to say, which is actually grounded in something practical, like simply not knowing the sort of tricks of organizing your topics, for instance, if you're
Mm,
writing a book.
yeah.
Um, that's it's not knowledge you necessarily have unless you've gone into higher education or know an author or have been on courses and things. So, um, yeah, there are various reasons, and that's the reason why it's so very individual. I mean, the truth is that a coach does so very little. It's the energy and effort and soul of the client that propels them to success. But sometimes what they're missing is a catalyst, and that's what a coach can be.
I think that's my experience. Yes,
I think
catalyst.
that's particularly true in Stick's story because I wasn't officially coaching him. I was
Yeah,
giving him bits of advice. And
advice
the next
and
time I
helping him.
saw him, and he would just have run so far and applied the analogy to various other parts of his life that I had no knowledge of. It was his active hunger and taking whatever resources he could find and really running, including my sort of thoughts and advice and suggestions, and running with it. And that's true with every successful client.
Yes, in a way there's a sort of midwifing aspect to it as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
The pushing and the giving birth, as it were, and you're encouraging them and supporting them, and and the thing I find fascinating about coaching and mentoring is how um, sometimes it just takes one piece of advice that you're able to give at the right time that does the trick. It's just what somebody needs to hear at that moment, and then they can run with it, and then it makes sense. And I think I know that sort of from both ends of the system. I realize the obvious truth, which is that when it comes to writing, there are plenty of ideas you can have, but there are no rules.
Ways to do it.
Yeah, loads of ways to do it. and here are some helpful ways you can try, but they may not suit you. It happens to suit me to read my previous day's writing. Somebody else, it may put them off, and they get sort of sidetracked into editing and being overly perfectionist around what they've written. And that means you can work from wherever you are in the world, which is London, I think, isn't it? Is that right?
No, I'm in Somerset.
You're in Somerset. Oh, how nice.
Yeah, I'm not far from Glastonbury.
So one subject that really interests me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is this question of flow. In Druidry, it's talked about as Arwen, the blessings of the spirit, the sort of the flow of inspiration, and I think lots of people who are creative experience that, and some people actually feel it physically. Painters will say they sort of feel it flowing through their bodies, and sometimes when I'm writing, I almost can think, oh gosh, as my sort of fingers move on the keyboard, there's another part of me thinking, that's rather good. I didn't know I thought that, or that's a new idea for me, or something like that. It can just literally flow in an impersonal way. And of course, musicians, I've heard, people like Paul McCartney talk about how, well, I didn't really write that song. It just came through me. And Elizabeth Gilbert's written a fantastic book called Big Magic about writing fiction and her experience of that sort of flow energy. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, for me, all the things they say about the work coming from somewhere else is something I've both literally viscerally experienced as a singer, but also something that comes from the Asian tradition. So there is this sense that ragas, for instance, which Westerners know as a sort of, in very simplistic terms, as a limited scale on which you can only use certain notes, and it gives the melody a certain flavor. And there are hundreds of ragas and sort of sub-ragas. But in Asian philosophy, in Hinduism, the raga is a person and is associated with the time of day and with a certain emotion, and is depicted in paintings. It might represent a certain story or a certain moment in a certain sort of story of mythology. And so the idea is that the raga is a creature who has been incarnated dumb and needs you to give it its voice. That's the poetic sense in which, we are actually giving voice to another person, let alone another creation that's flowing through us. So I've had it from both sides. That's what I'm saying. I've got it in my tradition, but I've also experienced the truth of it.
You've experienced it. Now that is a really interesting idea, isn't it? That the flow, rather than conceiving of it as a sort of like a flow of water or a flow of energy that is sort of impersonal, this idea that you've suggested of that there's a being who wants to express itself through you is a very interesting idea, isn't it? Very
Yeah, and I
exciting.
think that's also true of various projects. It feels to me sometimes like a song has whispered itself in my ear and wants me to sing it. And I equally think that once the creation is made, it has some of that energy about it. I was referencing earlier this a 900-year-old Irish folk song that I sing called Donalogue. I only ever heard that song once, but I couldn't get it out of my head. I was obsessed with it for a good year. And when I think about, because, a folk tradition is largely oral tradition. And when you think about how many generations of singers that song has inhabited, if you think of it as a being,
Mm.
and it's found a new host almost in each generation. It's almost, you could almost think of a catchy song like a virus, when you have an earworm and you can't get it out of your head.
Yeah.
And that old memes, people talk about memes these days having a life of their own when they go viral.
Mm.
And I think, the best melodies in a way have that quality. They go viral and they jump from generation to generation. They find people to carry them forward generation to generation. So in a way, I think of each song as a being, not just a raga that can be sung 5, 20, 100 times.
That's a lovely idea, Sheila. That's really beautiful, actually. And it explains too, or rather, it helps to give form to this phenomenon that you may have experienced, that when you've created something, it sort of has a life of its own. It goes out there into the world, and you can no longer control it, like a little child that you've given birth to, who takes off
Yeah.
over the horizon. Um,
Yeah, I
you,
mean, I'm the ever so lonely girl. When I tried to enter the publishing industry,
yeah,
and of course, in my biog to the prospective agents that I sent out, I
yeah,
had a little line about monsoon. Oh, it's the ever so lonely girl.
yeah,
That was that's
that,
the
that-
and it
yeah,
was this is 30 years later.
yeah, yeah, and it goes out there. And the other phenomenon, so there's that thing of it having a creative work, having a life of its own, which you can't predict. Just as with a child, when your child's born, you can't predict what's going to happen.
Mm,
They,
mm.
um, there's also a phenomenon I've noticed in creativity, which is, um, I've just found this myself, and I haven't really talked with many people about this. So I'd be interested to know if other people experience this too. Is that when I am fully engaged with a creative project, so I'm writing a book, it's like other books or other projects seem to be attracted by that, and so kind of come in. So it's almost, and there's a part of me saying, "Oh, will you go away? Because I'm trying to focus on this one." But there's another one sort of queuing up are you familiar with this process?
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I think it's because when you enter what we what we call the state of flow,
Hmm.
it's like being in a river,
Yeah.
and projects, these beings, all sort of flow down them. And I
Yeah,
think
there's
when
more
you're in
stuff
the
coming
river,
down the
you get hit by more more projects, which
logs
is why
floating
it's
down.
so important when you're a creator to do, rather than sit there thinking, I want to write this. I wanted to write it for 20 years, and it needs to be perfect. Then you're not in the river anymore. You're
Yeah.
kind of all clamped up and out on the land. But when you're free and easy about it and you're playing, that's when the other stuff tends to come through because you're open.
Exactly. You've opened yourself up in some way, and having that playful attitude, I think, is so important. Because I think, don't you find that one of the biggest blocks to creativity is this belief that you have to completely clear the decks and be in the perfect circumstances?
Mm.
So when we've moved house, and when the kids have left, they've only got a year more until they go to university, and then when uh, when I've got my own studio, I've got my own office or whatever, there's always some ideal state. And when I look back on my life, virtually everything I've written has always been in an imperfect situation, like sort of, in the corner of some room that wasn't mine, or I don't know. I mean, sometimes I've been in sort of perfect, lovely places and all the rest of it, but a lot of the time I've had all sorts of other stuff going on as well. Um, and I think it's just something you just have to, it's an idea. It's a wrong idea about creativity, that you need the perfect environment and the perfect setting, you know.
Yeah. I think the problem is with creativity is it's such an internalized process, and we are a very pictorial culture. I mean, we're almost going that way with writing as well,
Mm.
with emojis rather than full sentences.
Mm.
And there, when I wrote Organizing Your Creative Career, one of the things I referenced right at the beginning of the book was this sort of chaos myth, the Van Gogh chaos myth, the suffering to be an artist and
Mm.
everything. I mean, isn't there a story about when he lived with Gauguin that there was turpentine in all the cups when they tried to make tea, or that kind of chaos?
Yeah.
Genius equals mental illness and
Mm.
chaos. And actually, I think that's really sells the creative process short. But it's because film directors and novelists have all thought, how can I visually represent this swirl of ideas, this obsession with, the ideas and where they're going to go. Oh, I know, loads of paper and
Yes, the
uh,
depicting, it's more colorful and interesting rather than the quiet, slow, quite internal process of creativity. I
and I think also, ironically, people are quite afraid of that process
mm,
because we've been trained out of it. You know how creative a child is. At 3
mm,
years old, they're not at all self-conscious. Give them a set of crayons and some paper, and they'll be going, "Oh, look, an elephant!" The
yeah,
second you turn round.
yeah,
But we lose that, and it gets trained out of us. And I think we subconsciously carry a sense of loss and resentment about that loss. And I think that's what rears its head when the old propaganda about artists are lazy, they don't really do anything, they don't deserve to be highly paid, life of Riley kind of. Actually, being an artist is tough.
mm,
It's a hard life. It's can be a very unstable life, and it takes great personal courage to work like that. But there isn't, and I think there isn't. Art has become so accessible and ubiquitous in our culture. I mean, you think 500 years ago, how many great paintings would you see in your lifetime?
mm,
If you're an ordinary person or even a merchant,
mm,
how many great houses would you walk round? How many great books would you ever own or read?
mm,
Uh, how many great minstrels would you hear? You
mm.
certainly can't put a tune on while you're cleaning your teeth in the morning.
Yes, that's right.
You can't hear it when you're dining in an inn
Mm,
because you know uh, there isn't a loudspeaker system, and musicians are expensive. So
mm.
uh, we kind of take art for granted as well. And I think that's part of the resentment process. We get it so easy, we have access to it so easily
Yeah,
that we almost forget it's there. We forget that every book cover we pick up has been designed. Even every free pizza leaflet that comes through the door has been designed,
mm, mm.
been lettered, has been thought about, the proportions have been thought about.
Yeah,
That's art, and people don't realize, even every cheap plastic product these days has got, it's got a nice curve in it to make it more attractive, even though it's a very cheap material.
yeah,
People don't recognize how much art is around them.
mm.
Um, and yeah, so there's that odd, I can't be there and I've lost my creativity. So these people are
Yes,
doing it and enjoying it.
it's a complex world we're living in, where on the one hand, the creatives and creativity is put on a pedestal and is associated with fame and fortune, and therefore out of reach and so on, and is othered in some way. But at the same time, it's taken for granted because there's just this mass of artistic product that you can absorb through the internet and around you and all the rest of it. So it's
And there's the cheering at the downfall of people who suffer misfortune because
yeah,
something's gone wrong in their lives and they're famous and they have a kind of social fall, and
and
there's
everybody
all the glear
feasts
out
on
about
that
it.
and so on.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think the role that you're fulfilling and of the ally, it's like the word that comes to me as well as coaching. It's like an ally. It's having this person who's got your back and who encourages you, supports you. Sometimes they're sort of fulfilling a midwife kind of role of helping you give birth to something that's precious to you, and other
And also
times,
they're disinterested. And
yeah,
that's important. Not
that's
uninterested, but disinterested, as in not having a personal stake. Because
exactly,
when you work with various band members, they've all got their own agenda. And if you
yeah,
work with a publishing house, they've got their agenda. And if you are new, or you don't know what you're doing, or you're entering a new field, or you're growing to the next level, it's useful to have someone to talk to, even if they don't know the specifics of your industry, about the dynamics and the agendas and what you think is really going on.
exactly, yeah, yeah. And I think really, really important. That's really fantastic. Well,
Another aspect of it is stage fright, because quite a lot of ordinary people have to go and present to the board or give a talk, or more people are giving TED talks. I went through stage fright because when my voice started to go wrong, I was still going on stage. And you have this experience of you're on stage alone,
mm,
because all my performances as a solo artist were given alone. And people have heard the record, they know what it's supposed to sound like.
mm,
And you've got nothing to hide behind. It's just your voice in the space, sometimes completely unaccompanied, no drone even.
mm.
And if you don't know that your voice is going to behave, then you very realistically start to become frightened.
Yeah, I bet.
That thing of rabbit in the headlights, of everyone's looking at you and it's the time is now kind of thing.
Exactly.
So I took 8 years to overcome stage fright and enjoy performing again.
Wow, that's so interesting, and of course, and you've added in another whole area that in terms of supporting clients, in terms of dealing with their anxieties around, stage fright, anxieties about their creativity, really around what they're doing. So it's very,
Because you might be great, for instance, you might be great writing in your little study as an author,
mm,
but having to go and do a press tour might terrify you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And in fact, I think surveys show that public speaking, most people are really frightened of public speaking. Yeah.
Some people would rather jump off a bridge than give a
Yeah,
speech.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Sheila, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for this. This discussion has been really interesting, I think,
Well, a great pleasure to talk with you.
and I hope it's helped people. Thank you for this conversation. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
I saw you first on a Sunday evening about the altar as I was kneeling upon Christ's passion as I was reading. But my eye was on you, and my sore heart bleeding. Oh, Donald, can't you feel me near you? Why don't you tremble the way that I do? I'll be your lantern to show you truth plainly. And if you are set on, I'll defend you bravely. Oh, wild as a crow is this heart within me. Dark as your shadow is this grief that blinds me. Stained as a blueprint on a polished hallway. And it is you that has stained it forever and always. Oh, eh. Oh, eh. Oh. You took what's before me and what's behind me. You took east and west when you wouldn't mind me. Sun, moon, and stars from my sky you've taken, and the God above, or I'm much mistaken. I saw you first on a Sunday evening, about the altar as I was kneeling upon Christ's passion as I was reading, but my eye was on you, and my sore heart bleeding.